Hello, and welcome to the 2018 New Mexico Gubernatorial Candidate Forum, a Sunshine Week conversation on open government issues. I'm Kip Purcell, co-moderator of today's forum. I'm a former president and current board member of the New Mexico Foundation for Open Government, and I'm from Albuquerque.
And I'm Kathy Bearden, co-moderator of the forum. I'm a former president and current board member of the New Mexico Foundation for Open Government as well, and I'm from Hobbs. The New Mexico Foundation for Open Government is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to helping the citizens, students, educators, public officials, media, and legal professionals of New Mexico understand, obtain, and exercise their rights and responsibilities under New Mexico's Sunshine Laws, the Inspection of Public Records Act, the Open Meetings Act, and the Arrest Record Information Act.
We'll begin with an opening statement. We'll hear from Representative Michelle Lujan Grisham.
Thank you. I want to thank FOG for hosting this very valuable forum, and I also want to thank you for your incredible advocacy alongside countless other organizations who have worked to improve transparency and openness in government. I spent my entire career fighting for a transparent and open government because I find all too often that government is closed, secret, unaccountable, and intractable, which is why, as a cabinet secretary, I would publish reports that were not required to be published to make sure that we were improving access to the public about our priorities and our public services. As a Bernalillo County Commissioner, I led the effort to improve our ethics and financial disclosure requirements, and I hope, as your next governor, I will commit to a new culture of government openness, and we do that by making sure we fully embrace an ethics commission, brand new financial and ethics disclosures for all public officials, and that we create an atmosphere that all information is readily available to the public. I want to thank you again very much for hosting this.
The Inspection of Public Records Act allows government agencies to charge only the actual costs of copying documents requested by the public. The Attorney General says that these costs may include any personnel time involved. Open government advocates disagree because the statute declares that providing people with information about state government is an integral part of the routine duties of public officers and employees. In your opinion, should government be able to charge more for copies than Kinko's does? We'll start with Representative Lujan Grisham.
So, no, I don't think state government entities ought to be able to, frankly, charge anything. I understand the issue about reasonable costs, and we've got an underfunded state budget, but the reality is that if you're denying access because people have an inability to pay for copies or administrative time, then you're not meeting the spirit of sunshine laws or transparent government. The best defense to this issue in general, in addition to a governor, and I would be that kind of governor, make sure that folks get access to all public information that they're entitled to without exception, and making sure that I'm accountable by knowing which one of my state government agencies are have FOIA requests or IPA requests, and making sure that we're getting that information out. But by having more digitized records online so that people can get access to this information. It's exactly what I did in Bernalillo County. It's exactly what I would do as governor.
This question was provided by Common Cause New Mexico. In 2017, the legislature passed a constitutional amendment to create an independent ethics commission that will be on the ballot this November. If the voters approve the amendment, nuts and bolts enabling legislation will be considered during the 2019 session. What are the top 3 things your administration would support to enable this commission to investigate complaints, rebuild public trust, and serve the interests of all parties involved?
Thank you. I agree with most of what's been said related to the Ethics Commission. I mean, it's very clear in the enabling legislation passed by the legislature that it has the power to adjudicate. We've got an appointment process to make sure it's fair and balanced between the legislature and the executive. We want to make sure that that's not heavily weighted for one party to another. But the real issue, if it's going to adjudicate, investigate, and have subpoena powers, it's got to be fully funded. This means that it's got to be a multi-million-dollar independent agency. We have to start doing doing, and that's the number one thing, before it's created and after. You have to educate the public about what its powers and responsibilities are. And like whistleblowers, you need to know what issues to be looking for so that you've got a commission that's receiving that. Two, I would commit to a state ombudsman that's helping to get complaints where they need to go so they're being fully reviewed and investigated. I think that that would make an incredible difference. And the third thing, again, actually, I think I said education and ombudsman and making sure it's fully funded, but creating a culture where the Ethics Commission is the standard, not the exception.
Under current law, all applications for public employment are considered public records, except that applications for the presidency of a public college or university can remain confidential aside from the names of the 5 finalists. Recently, there have been attempts to make some or even most government job applications secret. The theory behind these proposals is that openness deters some of the best candidates from applying. If elected governor, would you support or oppose such efforts, and why?
I have to agree with many of the candidates today who said there can be and will be, frankly, unintended consequences. And the issue for me is there are other best practices that include not disclosing at the front end, but as soon as a hire is made, you disclose everything in the process, including offers, resumes, where they were placed, how long those folks were in the queue for those hiring practices. I would support either of those options because I agree that ultimately we want to increase transparency and credibility for the government. But I think it is very important to create opportunities much like this forum where folks are really earnestly talking about how it works, what it does, and what the unintended consequences look like. And we ought to be focused on best practices across the country and some best practices right here. And I would be open to either of those approaches to move us forward in a much more public fashion. Thank you.
The Richardson administration entered into a settlement agreement with FOG and several news organizations in 2007 designed to ensure public access to state police reports compiled by officers initially responding to a crime scene. FOG believes that the agreement also covers lapel camera footage. The Susana Martinez administration is seeking to invalidate that agreement on the ground that it goes beyond what the Inspection of Public Records Act requires. If you're elected governor, what position would your administration take? Representative Lujan Grisham.
Well, I agree with Senator Cervantes that the issue is that we don't have, that the state law is inconsistent with the settlement. We need to change that state law. And I also agree that the use of body cameras is another transparency tool that acts as both. It can protect the side of the situation from the police officer's point of view. It can also protect citizens so we understand what happened, particularly now right here in my district and in my hometown where I'm currently living. The Albuquerque Police Department is under a consent decree, and we are looking at excessive force. I'm very concerned as a member of Congress right now what's going on with the Department of Homeland Security, and they need their agents to also have body cameras because we can't access arrest records. They don't do actual arrests, they do detentions. So you're limited because you don't have consistency in the state or federal laws, and we should do everything in our power to increase transparency to make sure that that's clear in every piece of legislation.
If voters approve the constitutional amendment creating an independent ethics commission, excuse me, how will your administration support fully funding the commission to enable it to properly perform its functions and to keep the public informed through public hearings around the state?
Thank you very much. I want to focus on a different kind of hearings, but make sure I answer the question fully, which is in preparation for the ballot question for the Ethics Commission, I would really strongly urge the New Mexico legislature to conduct interim hearings by the legislative branch so that they are going into local communities, we are preparing, we're looking at issues, we're figuring out who ought to be qualified to be appointed, that you're creating a structure so that when it's funded in the 2019 legislative session, you're very clear about how it should operate, where it should operate, and what it's going to take for them to not only identify and address complaints, but to fully adjudicate those complaints, including what happens after you adjudicate. Who takes on that issue of removing a public official or prosecuting a case or dealing with an issue inside a body of government that needs to be changed or statutory change. So you want to make sure that you're prepared to do that, because what we really want is an ethics commission that begins to open up these issues for all of government.
Do you plan any initiatives to make more public records available electronically? Representative Lujan Grisham.
Actually, on the prescription issue, which isn't quite the question, I want to actually take that opportunity thank you, Congressman Pierce. A lot of this information gets out through a Medicaid contract to a whole variety of contractors, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical benefit companies, and the problem is it's proprietary. So here's an initiative. You require all of those contracts to give you back that data so that you can provide it then to the doctors and to constituents so they know the true cost and how that's being borne out of Medicaid. We don't do that currently. We have trouble just managing the basic utility data. I would also have a long-term, not a long-term ombudsman, that's the health ombudsman program, but I want a state ombudsman that's moving all of these records and committing to getting them digitized. In addition to a public records custodian, have a person that's embedded in every single agency and department who's also getting your paper records up on the internet. If you don't do that, then you can't be accountable for those agencies. So you create those structures so that you know that you're providing the information to the public. Thank you.
State agencies create databases that have economic value to private businesses. In licensing businesses to use these databases, should government place a priority on maximizing revenue or instead on maximizing the public availability of government information? And we'll start with Representative Lujan Grisham.
Easy answer. Absolutely, it's got to be in the public interest. If we don't protect our citizens by making sure that they have access to information and we make it about what the costs are, then we are using that as a vehicle to keep a closed and secret government. And while I think there are real costs and there are balances here, given that we have information in government about people, we have their health records, we have complaint records without having full due process, we have foster grandparent, and we have protective services issues that require a different set of attention, which means the burden is expensive. You have to err on the side of the citizen, and you have to make it easy for them. So I would not let that excuse ever find its way into my administration as governor.
We'll now move on to closing statements, and you have 60 seconds for your closing statement.
Thank you. I want to thank FOG for this forum. I think it's really important that we're being very clear about the role in government in providing access to its information to the public. And I think we've done a good job, the candidates today, really talking about some of those privacy balances. But this is an issue of leadership and culture and experience. If you lead by creating the expectation by everyone in government and everyone in the legislature and every public official to create an environment where we're completely transparent, you will get a much more open government. Knowledge is power. And if we don't provide that knowledge to the public, it subjects itself to real abuses in the system. And that's why as a cabinet secretary I did that. That's why as a Bernalillo County Commissioner I've done that. That's why successfully in Congress my very first piece of legislation was to deal with making sure that you got effective financial reporting and requirements and disclosures from nonprofits who were not currently required to do it. That's what a governor will do. That's what I'll do as governor.
Thank you.
This brings our forum to a close.